The Beholder versus the Overmind. Hey everybody, Dungeon Builder back again with another video. We have the classic tentacle-eyed D&D aberration, the Beholder, versus the new and rethought creation from Matthew Koval's new book, Flea Mortals, the Overmind. Alright, let's dive into these stat blocks and see what we got going on. So I want to dive into these not so much to compare them in the sense one is better than the other, more I want to see what improvements, if any, they made to the Overmind and what they tried to do different compared to the classic Beholder. So first up, they both have 180 HP, but they lowered the Overmind's AC by 1 to 17. I'm guessing making it easier to hit gives you more flexibility from a design point of view to make it stronger in other more interesting ways, such as new abilities, or it can deal more damage. But let's press on and see if that's the case. Okay, looking at the overall ability scores, Strength is the same at a flat 10. They gave it a bump in Dex from 14 to 15, and Con is the same at 18. Intelligence gets a 1-point bump as well. Wisdom gets a 1-point slump from 15 to 14, and the same for Charisma from 17 to 16. So really not anything crazy as far as the stat changes and the overall scores. So the biggest cosmetic differences is that the classic Beholder has eye stalks that the eyes connect to the main body, whereas the Overmind has detached eyes that float around its main body, kind of like a death tyrant. Each of the detached eyes acts as its own object that can be targeted directly with an AC of 24 and 1 hit point. That's pretty dope, so it lets the players specifically target different eye effects and try to destroy them mid-combat. I like that. Adds some cool strategy to the fight, and if an eye is lost, the Overmind creates a new floating eye at the end of its turn. Wow, really powerful, but makes things more complex. Also, an eye can't be hit unless it's been used that round. I really like that overall idea. Now, it does make more work for the DM to keep track of what eye has been used/destroyed, but if you're running just the Overmind, that's not too bad. Also, an eye can't be hit unless it's been used that round. Really like the overall idea. Now, it does make more work for the DM to keep track of what eye has been used/destroyed, but if you're just running the Overmind by itself, that really isn't too bad. It's not too much bookkeeping. Looks like they have the same 4d6 bite attack, so let's move on. Let's look at the Overmind's actions/eye rays and see how different or similar they are to the classic Beholder. Just as a reminder, a Beholder has Charm, Paralyzing, Fear, Slowing, Enervation, Telekinetic, Sleep, Petrification, Disintegration, and Death Rays. That's 10 rays you gotta read and use in combat. The Overmind has been slimmed down to just 6 rays: Charm, Compulsion, Toxic Vapors, Telekinetic, Lightning Bolt, and Fire Beams. I definitely like a lot of the changes to help make combat more streamlined to run the Overmind. I also like that they really seem to focus on getting rid of effects that take players out of combat for no good reason. Like, rather than putting a player to sleep so you can't do anything on your turn, the Compulsion Beam has them make an attack on another player, but doesn't screw them out of their turn. And I think that's a great focus, because there's a lot of effects and things in 5e that kind of just jip a player out of their turn, and while it makes sense in a broad overhead view of combat, it sucks for the player who did nothing for 10 minutes and then has to wait another 10 minutes for the round to get back to them. So I like a lot of those changes. So it looks like instead of having the anti-magic cone in the central eye of the Beholder, the Overmind gets a bonus action ability with its main eye called the Great Eye. It recharges on a 6 and is a 150-foot cone that affects the Overmind and anyone in the area. It immediately ends a spell effect for the affected creatures. That is super useful from a DM point of view. So let's say if the Overmind's hexed and slowed, you can use this ability to just wipe that away, but it has to recharge, so it's not too overly powered. Really like that to make things more interesting. Sometimes from a DM point of view, you're trying to run an interesting monster, and, they're just tanking the thing. They hit it with all kinds of stuff, and if it's been hexed and slowed, banished, whatever, you're kind of screwed. Like, you're just, they cut the legs out from under you, and sometimes that's great. You want your players to feel powerful, and it's great when they can do something cool like that, but other times you want to give them a challenge, and having that ability that, you have to roll to recharge is pretty awesome. And finally, the Overmind gets a reaction, away with you. This is a very cool ability. Just gives you, as the Dungeon Master, the option to help move people around the battlefield. I like creatures that can keep things moving around so players don't get too stationary, especially if you're going to be running this most likely as a single monster. It's nice to have people moving around. It gets kind of boring if everybody's just staying in one spot and casting spells and slashing and nothing's really moving. It's like, why even have the map out? Overall, I think the changes they made are really great. Now, the Overmind is like the base version of the Beholder, but they also have a higher challenge rating version that gets other beams and villain actions, which are replacements for layer actions. Now, from what I can understand, the villain actions can only be used once per encounter and only one villain action per round. So they tend to be more powerful, but I like the idea of less repetition and having something that you can really change the state of how a battle is going. Let's look at the higher powered version of the Overmind, which looks like it could be a BBEG, or Big Bad Evil Guy. Its name is Zarnox. So the AC is back to 18, and an HP is way up at 228. They get a different reaction called Cower that can cause fear. Honestly, I like the reaction that lets you fling someone a little bit better, but I understand that this creature really should not be putting itself in a melee situation if it can help it, so it kind of makes sense. Now, a lot of the I-beams are similar, but I want to look at two that are very interesting. First, the Memory Beam. This thing is wild. Memory Beam. The targeted creature must make a DC 17 intelligence saving throw. On a failed save, if the creature has unexpended spell slots, they expend a spell slot of their highest remaining level with no effect. If they don't have unexpended spell slots, they instead lose proficiency with a weapon they're holding or carrying for 1 minute. Save ends at end of turn, meaning they make the save again at the end of their turn. I really like adding the new mechanic that messes with spell slots. What a fun way to change things up and cause some chaos at your table. Also, the Necrosis Beam. This does big damage, but the interesting thing is it just keeps doing 2d6 damage every round until the creature is slain or the target dies or gets out of the Overmind's sight. So this is a great ticking clock element to have in the battle. They're just going to keep taking that damage over and over and over again no matter what. So that's pretty rad. Now, replacing legendary actions are villain actions. Each villain action can only be used once per the entire encounter, but they can be used in any order. Kind of a fun update to legendary actions. Less the DM has to track for the whole combat, since once they're used, they're no longer in play. But man, some are brutal, which makes sense because they're single use. Let's run down through them real quick. Action 1. Disruption Beams. Zarnox shoots a psionic disruption beam at 3 creatures he can see within 120 feet of him. Each target must make a DC 17 wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, whenever the target makes more than one weapon attack on a turn or casts a spell that isn't a cantrip, they take 4d6 psychic damage. This effect lasts for 1 minute. Save again at the end of your turn. Okay. Action 2. Disappearing Act. Zarnox turns invisible until the end of his next turn, teleports to 120 feet to an unoccupied space he can see. Action 3. Negative. Zarnox unleashes the effects of all of his remaining psionic eyes at once in a 20-foot wide, 120-foot long line. Each creature in the area must make a save against 2 random eye effects from Zarnox's eye psionics. Reroll duplicates for each target. If the effect usually affects an area, it instead only affects the individual creatures. Dang, that's pretty wild. Compare that to the regular Beholder, which is eye ray, use a random eye ray. Now, to be fair, it is a classic monster and very original. The Overmind is a very fun reimagining of this classic monster, but leans heavily on the lore/ideas of the Beholder, obviously. Honestly, both are great. You know, the Beholder's so classic, but I really do like the I-beam changes that they made for the Overmind, and I really like those villain actions, so I'm really excited to try those out and see how they compare to legendary actions. But let me know what you think. Drop a comment. Do you think the Beholder is still top dog, or do you think this new kid on the block, the Overmind, is too cool for school. But seriously, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, share, subscribe to help me grow the channel, and I'll catch you in the next one. Keep building. I-beams, ray beams, I-beam, beam rays, I rays, beam rays, ray beams, beams, eyes, rays, beams, beams. I ray beams.
Beam ray eyes.
I ray beams, beam ray eyes.